Las papayas. Papayas.
Estas son las mañanitas que cantaba el rey David a las muchachas bonitas, se las cantamos aquí.
These are the morning songs which King David used to sing to all the pretty girls. We sing them here to you. Esperanza heard Papa and the others singing. They were outside her window, and their voices were clear and melodic. Before she was aware, she smiled, because her first thought was that today was her birthday. I should get up and wave kisses to Papa. But when she opened her eyes, she realized she was in her parents' bed, on Papa's side. That still smelled like him, and the song had been in her dreams. Why hadn't she slept in her own room? Then the events of last night wrenched her mind into reality. Her smile faded, her chest tightened, and a heavy blanket of anguish smothered her smallest joy. Papa and his vaqueros had been ambushed and killed while mending a fence on the farthest reaches of the ranch. The bandits stole their boots, saddles, and horses, and they even took the beef jerky that Papa had hidden in his pockets for Esperanza. Esperanza got out of bed and wrapped un shawl around her shoulders. The shawl felt heavier than usual. Was it the yarn, or was her heart weighing her down? She went downstairs and stood in la sala, the large entry hall. The house was empty and silent. Where was everyone? Then she remembered that Abuela and Alfonso were taking Mama to see the priest this morning. Before she could call for Hortensia, there was a knocking at the front door. "Who is there?" called Esperanza through the door. "It is Señor Rodriguez. I have the papayas." Esperanza opened the door. Marisol's father stood before her, his hat in his hand. Beside him was a big box of papayas. "Your father ordered these from me for the fiesta today. I tried to deliver them to the kitchen, but no one answered." She stared at the man who had known Papa since he was a boy. Then she looked at the green papayas ripening to yellow. She knew why Papa had ordered them. Papaya, coconut, and lime salad was Esperanza's favorite, and Hortensia made it every year on her birthday. Her face crumbled. "Señor," she said, choking back tears, "have you not heard? My Papa is dead." Señor Rodriguez stared blankly, then said, "¿Qué pasa, niña? What happened?" She took a quivery breath as she told the story. She watched the grief twist Señor Rodriguez's face and overtake him as he sat down on the patio bench, shaking his head. She felt as if she were in someone else's body, watching a sad scene but unable to help. Hortensia walked out and put her arm around Esperanza. She nodded to Señor Rodriguez, then guided Esperanza back up the stairs to the bedroom. "He ordered the papayas," sobbed Esperanza. "I know," whispered Hortensia, sitting next to her on the bed and rocking her back and forth. "I know." The rosaries, masses, and funeral lasted 3 days. People whom Esperanza had never seen before came to the ranch to pay their respects. They brought enough food to feed 10 families every day, and so many flowers that the overwhelming fragrance gave them all headaches, and Hortensia finally put the bouquets outside. Marisol came with Señor and Señora Rodriguez several times. In front of the adults, Esperanza modeled Mama's refined manners, accepting Marisol's condolences. But as soon as they could, the two girls excused themselves and went to Esperanza's room, where they sat on her bed, held hands, and wept as one. The house was full of visitors and their polite murmurings during the day. Mama was cordial and attentive to everyone, as if entertaining them gave her a purpose. At night, though, the house emptied. The rooms seemed too big without Papa's voice to fill them, and the echoes of their footsteps deepened their sadness. Abuela sat by Mama's bed every night and stroked her head until she slept. Then she would come around to the other side and do the same for Esperanza. But soon after, Esperanza often woke to Mama's soft crying, or Mama woke to hers, and then they held each other without letting go until morning. Esperanza avoided opening her birthday gifts. Every time she looked at the packages, they reminded her of the happy fiesta she was supposed to have. One morning, Mama finally insisted, saying, Papa would have wanted it. Abuela handed Esperanza each gift, and Esperanza methodically opened them and laid them back on the table. A white purse for Sundays with a rosary inside from Marisol, a rope of blue beads from Chita, the book Don Quixote from Abuela, a beautiful embroidered dresser's scarf from Mama for Sunday. Finally, she opened the box she knew was the doll. She couldn't help thinking that it was the last thing Papa would ever give her. Hands trembling, she lifted the lid and looked inside the box. The doll wore a fine white batiste dress and a white lace mantilla over her black hair. Her porcelain face looked wistfully at Esperanza with enormous eyes. "Oh, she looks like an angel," said Abuela, taking her handkerchief from her sleeve and blotting her eyes. Mama said nothing but reached out and touched the doll's face. Esperanza couldn't talk. Her heart felt so big and hurt so much that it crowded out her voice. She hugged the doll to her chest and walked out of the room, leaving all the other gifts behind. Tio Luis and Tio Marco came every day and went into Papa's study to take care of the family business. At first they stayed only a few hours, but soon they became like La Calabaza, the squash plant in Alfonso's garden, whose giant leaves spread out, encroaching upon anything smaller. The uncles eventually stayed each day until dark, taking all their meals at the ranch as well. Esperanza could tell that Mama was uneasy with their constant presence. Finally, the lord came to settle the estate. Mama, Esperanza, and Abuela sat properly in their black dresses as the uncles walked into the study. A little too loudly, Tio Luis said, "Ramona, grieving does not suit you. I hope you will not wear black all year." Mama did not answer, but maintained her composure. They nodded to Abuela, but as usual, said nothing to Esperanza. The talk began about bank loans and investments. It all seemed so complicated to Esperanza, and her mind wandered. She had not been in this room since Papa died. She looked around at Papa's desk and books, Mama's basket of crocheting with the silver crochet hooks that Papa had bought her in Guadalajara, the table near the door that held Papa's rose clippers, and beyond the double doors, his garden. Her uncle's papers were strewn across the desk. Papa never kept his desk that way. Tio Luis sat in Papa's chair as if it were his own, and then Esperanza noticed the belt buckle. Papa's belt buckle on Tio Luis's belt. It was wrong. Everything was wrong. Tio Luis should not be sitting in Papa's chair. He should not be wearing Papa's belt buckle with the brand of the ranch on it. For the 1,000th time, she wiped the tears that slipped down her face, but this time they were angry tears. A look of indignation passed between Mama and Abuela. Were they feeling the same? "Ramona," said the lawyer, "your husband, Sixto Ortega, left this house and all of its contents to you and your daughter. You will also receive the yearly income from the grapes. As you know, it is not customary to leave land to women, and since Luis was the banker on the loan, Sixto left the land to him." "Which makes things rather awkward," said Tio Luis. "I am the bank president and would like to live accordingly. Now that I own this beautiful land, I would like to purchase the house from you for this amount." He handed Mama a piece of paper. Mama looked at it and said, "This is our home. My husband meant for us to live here, in the house. It is worth 20 times this much. So no, I will not sell. Besides, where would we live?" "I predicted you would say no, Ramona," said Tio Luis, "and I have a solution to your living arrangements. A proposal, actually. One of marriage." "Who is he talking about?" thought Esperanza. "Who would marry him?" He cleared his throat. "Of course, we would wait the appropriate amount of time out of respect for my brother. 1 year is customary, is it not? Even you can see that with your beauty and reputation and my position at the bank, we could be a very powerful couple. Did you know that I, too, have been thinking of entering politics? I'm going to campaign for governor, and what woman would not want to be the governor's wife?" Esperanza could not believe what she heard. Mama married Tio Luis? Marry a goat? She looked wide-eyed at him, then at Mama. Mama's face looked as if it were in terrible pain. She stood up and spoke slowly and deliberately. I have no desire to marry you, Louise, now or ever. Frankly, your offer offends me. Tio Louise's face hardened like a rock, and the muscles twitched in his narrow neck. You will regret your decision, Ramona. You must keep in mind that this house and those grapes are on my property. I can make things difficult for you. Very difficult. I will let you sleep on the decision, for it is more than generous. Tio Louise and Tio Marco put on their hats and left. The lawyer looked uncomfortable and began gathering documents. Vultures, said Abuela. Can he do this? Asked Mama. Yes, said the lawyer. Technically, he is now your landlord. But he could build another house, bigger and more pretentious, anywhere on the property, said Mama. It is not the house that he wants, said Abuela. It is your influence he wants. People in this territory love Sixto and respect you with you as his wife. Louise could win in any election. Mama stiffened. She looked at the lawyer and said, Please officially relay this message to Louise. I will never, ever change my mind. I will do that, Ramona, said the lawyer. But be careful. He is a devious, dangerous man. The lawyer left and Mama collapsed into a chair, put her head in her hands, and began to cry. Esperanza ran to her. Don't cry, Mama. Everything will be all right. But she didn't sound convincing even to herself, because all she could think about was that Tio Louise had said that Mama would regret her decision. That evening, Hortensia and Alfonso sat with Mama and Abuela discussing the problem. Esperanza paced and Miguel quietly looked on. Will the income from the grapes be enough to support the house and the servants, said Mama. Maybe, said Alfonso. Then I will stay in my home, said Mama. Do you have any other money? Asked Alfonso. I have money in the bank, announced Abuela, and then more quietly she added, Louise's bank. He would prevent you from taking it out, said Hortensia. If we need help, we could borrow money from our friends, from Senor Rodriguez, said Esperanza. Your uncles are very powerful and corrupt, said Alfonso. They can make things difficult for anyone who tries to help you. Remember, they are the banker and the mayor. The conversation continued to go on in circles. Esperanza finally excused herself. She walked out to Papa's garden and sat on a stone bench. Many of the roses had dropped their petals, leaving the stem and the rose hip, the green grape-like fruit of the rose. Abuela said the rose hip contained the memories of the roses, and that when you drank tea made from it, you took in all the beauty that the plant had known. These roses have known Papa, she thought. She would ask Hortensia to make rose-hip tea tomorrow. Miguel found her in the garden and sat beside her. Since Papa died, he had been polite, but still had not talked to her. Anza, he said, using her childhood name, which rose is yours? In recent years, his voice had become a deep throttle. She hadn't realized how much she missed hearing it. The sound brought tears to her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She pointed to the miniature pink blooms with delicate stems that climbed up the trellises. And where is mine? Said Miguel, nudging her like he did when they were younger and told each other everything. Esperanza smiled and pointed to the orange sunburst next to it. They had been young children the day Papa had planted one for each of them. What does it all mean, Miguel? There are rumors in town that Louise intends to take over the ranch one way or another. Now that it seems true, we will probably leave for the United States to work. Esperanza shook her head as if to say no. She could not imagine living without Hortensia, Alfonso, and Miguel. My father and I have lost faith in our country. We were born servants here, and no matter how hard we work, we will always be servants. Your father was a good man. He gave us a small piece of land and a cabin. But your uncles? You know their reputation. They would take it all away and treat us like animals. We will not work for them. The work is hard in the United States, but at least there we have a chance to be more than servants. But Mama and Abuela, we need you. My father says we won't leave until it is necessary. He reached over and took her hand. I'm sorry about your Papa. His touch was warm and Esperanza's heart skipped. She looked at her hand in his and felt the color rushing to her face. Surprised at her own blush, she pulled away from him. She stood and stared at the roses. An awkward silence built a wall between them. She glanced quickly at him. He was still looking at her with eyes full of hurt. Before Miguel left her there, he said softly, "You were right, Esperanza. In Mexico, we stand on different sides of the river." Esperanza went up to her room thinking that nothing seemed right. She walked slowly around her bed, running her hand over the finely carved posts. She counted the dolls lined up on her dresser, 13, one for each birthday. When Papa was alive, everything was in order, like the dolls lined up in a row. She put on a long cotton nightgown with hand-sewn lace, picked up the new doll, and walked to the open window. Looking out over the valley, she wondered where they would go if they had to live somewhere else. They had no other family except Abuela's sisters, and they were nuns in a convent. "I won't ever leave here," she whispered. A sudden breeze carried a familiar, pungent smell. She looked down into the courtyard and saw the wooden box still sitting on the patio. It held the papayas from Senor Rodriguez, the ones that Papa had ordered, that should have been served on her birthday. Their overripe sweetness now pervaded the air with each breath of wind. She crawled into bed beneath the linen's edge with lace, hugging the doll. She tried to sleep, but her thoughts kept returning to Tio Luis. She felt sick at the thought of Mama marrying him. Of course she had told him no. She took a deep breath, still smelling the papayas and Papa's sweet intentions. Why did Papa have to die? Why did he have to leave me and Mama? She closed her eyes tight and did what she tried to do each night. She tried to find the dream, the one where Papa was singing the birthday song. Los Higos, figs. The wind blew hard that night, and the house moaned and whistled. Instead of dreaming of birthday songs, Esperanza's sleep was filled with nightmares. An enormous bear was chasing her, getting closer and closer, and finally folding her in a tight embrace. Its fur caught in her mouth, making it hard to breathe. Someone tried to pull the bear away but couldn't. The bear squeezed harder until it was smothering Esperanza. Then, when she thought she would suffocate, the bear grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her until her head wagged back and forth. Her eyes opened, then closed again. She realized she was dreaming, and for an instant she felt relieved, but the shaking began again, harder this time. Someone was calling her. "Esperanza!" She opened her eyes. "Esperanza, wake up!" screamed Mama. "The house is on fire!" Smoke drifted into the room. "Mama, what's happening?" "Get up, Esperanza! We must get Abuela!" Esperanza heard Alfonso's deep voice yelling from somewhere downstairs. "Senora Ortega! Esperanza! Here! We are here!" called Mama, grabbing a damp rag from the wash bowl and handing it to Esperanza to put over her mouth and nose. Esperanza swung around in a circle looking for something, anything, to save. She grabbed the doll. Then she and Mama hurried down the hall toward Abuela's room, but it was empty. "Alfonso!" screamed Mama. Abuela is not here!" "We will find her. You must come now. The stairs are beginning to burn. Hurry!" Esperanza held the towel over her face and looked down the stairs. Curtains flamed up the walls. The house was enveloped in a fog that thickened toward the ceiling. Mama and Esperanza crouched down the stairs while Alfonso was waiting to lead them out through the kitchen. In the courtyard, the wooden gates were open. Near the stables, the vaqueros were releasing the horses from the corrals. Servants scurried everywhere. Where were they going? "Where's Abuela? Abuela!" cried Mama. Esperanza felt dizzy. Nothing seemed real. Was she still dreaming? Was this her own imagination gone wild? Miguel grabbed her. "Where's your mother and Abuela?" Esperanza whimpered and looked toward Mama. He left her, stopped at Mama, then ran toward the house. The wind caught the sparks from the house and carried them to the stables. Esperanza stood in the middle of it all, watching the outline of her home silhouetted in flames against the night sky. Someone wrapped a blanket around her. Was she cold? She did not know. Miguel ran out of the burning house carrying Abuela in his arms. He laid her down and Hortensia screamed. The back of his shirt was on fire. Alfonso tackled him, rolling him over and over on the ground until the fire was out. Miguel stood up and slowly took off the blackened shirt. He wasn't badly burned. Mama cradled Abuela in her arms. "Mama," said Esperanza, "is she?" "No, she is alive, but weak in her ankle. I don't think she can walk," said Mama. Esperanza knelt down. Abuela, where were you? Her grandmother held up the cloth bag with her crocheting, and after some minutes of coughing, whispered, "We must have something to do while we wait." The fire's anger could not be contained. It spread to the grapes. The flames ran along the deliberate rows of the vines, like long curved fingers reaching for the horizon, lighting the night sky. Esperanza stood as if in a trance and watched El Rancho de las Rosas burn. Mama, Abuela, and Esperanza slept in the servants' cabins. They really didn't sleep much, but they didn't cry either. They were numb, as if encased in a thick skin that nothing could penetrate. And there was no point in talking about how it happened. They all knew that the uncles had arranged the fire. At dawn, still in her nightgown, Esperanza went out among the rubble. Avoiding the smoldering piles, she picked through the black wood, hoping to find something to salvage. She sat on an adobe block near what used to be the front door, and looked over at Papa's rose garden. Flowerless stems were covered in soot. Dazed and hugging herself, Esperanza surveyed the surviving victims. The twisted forms of wrought iron chairs, unharmed, cast iron skillets, and the mortars and pestles from the kitchen that were made from lava rock and refused to burn. Then she saw the remains of the trunk that used to sit at the foot of her bed, the metal straps still intact. She stood up and hurried toward it, hoping for an unmilagro, a miracle. She looked closely, but all that remained were black cinders. There was nothing left inside for some day. Esperanza saw her uncles approaching on horseback and ran to tell the others. Mama waited on the steps of the cabin with her arms crossed, looking like a fierce statue. Alfonso, Hortensia, and Miguel stood nearby. "Ramona," said Tio Marco, remaining on his horse. "Another sadness in so short a time. We are deeply sorry." "I have come to give you another chance," said Tio Luis. "If you can reconsider my proposal, I will build a bigger, more beautiful house, and I will replant everything. Of course, if you prefer, you can live here with the servants, as long as another tragedy does not happen in their homes as well. There is no main house or fields where they can work, so you see that many people's lives and jobs depend on you. And I'm sure you want the best for Esperanza, do you not?" Mama did not speak for several moments. She looked around at the servants who had gathered. Now her face did not seem so fierce, and her eyes were damp. Esperanza wondered where the servants would go when Mama told Tia Louise no. Mama looked at Esperanza with eyes that said, "Forgive me." Then she dropped her head and stared at the ground. "I will consider your proposal," said Mama. Tia Louise smiled. "I am delighted. I have no doubt that you will make the right decision. I will be back in a few days for your answer." "Mama, no," said Esperanza. She turned to Tia Louise and said, "I hate you." Tia Louise ignored her. "And Ramona, if Esperanza is to be my daughter, she must have better manners. In fact, today I will look into boarding schools where they can teach her to act like a lady." Then he turned his horse, dug his spurs into the animal, and rode away. Esperanza began to weep. She cried. She grabbed Mama's arm and said, "Why? Why did you tell him that?" But Mama was not listening to her. She was looking up as if consulting the angels. Finally she said, "Alfonso, Hortensia, we must talk with Abuela. Esperanza and Miguel, come inside. You are old enough to hear the discussions." "But Mama." Mama took Esperanza by the shoulders and faced her. "Mija, my daughter, do not worry. I know what I am doing." They all crowded into Hortensia and Alfonso's tiny bedroom where Abuela was resting, her swollen ankle propped on pillows. Esperanza sat on Abuela's bed while Mama and the others stood. "Alfonso, what are my options?" said Mama. "If you don't intend to marry him, Senora, you cannot stay here. He would burn down the servants' quarters next. There will be no income because there are no grapes. You would have to depend on the charity of others, and they would be afraid to help you. You can move to some other part of Mexico, but in poverty. Luisa's influence is far-reaching." The room was quiet. Mama looked out the window and tapped her fingers on the wooden sill. Hortensia went to Mama's side and touched her arm. "You should know that we have decided to go to the United States. Alfonso's brother has been writing to us about the big farm in California where he works now. He can arrange jobs in a cabin for us, too. We are sending the letter tomorrow." Mama turned and looked at Abuela. With no word spoken, Abuela nodded. "What if Esperanza and I went with you to the United States?" said Mama. "Mama, we cannot leave Abuela." Abuela put her hand on Esperanza's. "I would come later, when I am stronger." "But my friends and my school, we can't just leave. And Papa, what would he think?" "What should we do, Esperanza? Do you think Papa would want me to marry Tio Luis and let him send you to a school in another city?" Esperanza felt confused. Her uncle said he would replace everything as it was, but she could not imagine Mama being married to anyone but Papa. She looked at Mama's face and saw sadness, worry, and pain. Mama would do anything for her, but if Mama married Tio Luis, she knew that everything would not really be as it was. Tio Luis would send her away, and she and Mama wouldn't even be together. "No," she whispered. "You are sure that you want to go with us?" said Hortensia. "I am sure," said Mama, her voice stronger. "But crossing the border is more difficult these days. You have your papers, but ours were lost in fire, and they forbid anyone to enter without a visa." "I will arrange it," said Abuela. "My sisters in the convent, they can discreetly get you duplicates." "No one can know about this, Senora," said Alfonso. "We would all have to keep it a secret if you come. This will be a great insult to Luis. If he finds out, he will prevent you from leaving the territory." A tiny smile appeared on Mama's tired face. "Yes, it would be a great insult to him, wouldn't it?" "In California, there's only field work," said Miguel. "I am stronger than you think," said Mama. "We will help each other." Hortensia put her arm around Mama. Abuela squeezed Esperanza's hand. "Do not be afraid to start over. When I was your age, I left Spain with my mother, father, and sisters. A Mexican official had offered my father a job here in Mexico, so we came. We had to take several ships, and the journey lasted months. When we arrived, nothing was as promised. There were many hard times, but life was also exciting, and we had each other. Esperanza, do you remember the story of the phoenix, the lovely young bird that is reborn from its own ashes?" Esperanza nodded. Abuela had read it to her many times from a book of myths. "We are like the phoenix," said Abuela, "rising again with a new life ahead of us." When she realized she was crying, Esperanza wiped her eyes with her shawl. Yes, she thought, they could have a home in California, a beautiful home. Alfonso and Hortensia and Miguel could take care of them, and they'd be rid of the uncles. And Abuela would join them as soon as she was well. Still sniffling and caught up in their affection and strength, Esperanza said, And I could work too." They all looked at her, and for the first time since Papa died, everyone laughed. The next day, Abuela's sisters came for her in a wagon. The nuns, dressed in their black and white habits, gently lifted Abuela into the back. They pulled a blanket under her chin, and Esperanza went to her and held her hand. She remembered the night that Alfonso and Miguel brought Papa home in the wagon. How long ago was that? She knew that it had only been a few weeks, but it seemed like many lifetimes ago. Esperanza tenderly hugged and kissed Abuela. "Manita, we won't be able to communicate. The mail's unpredictable, and I'm sure your uncles will be watching my correspondence. But I will come. Of that you can be certain. While you are waiting, finish this for me." She handed Esperanza the bundle of crocheting. "Look at the zigzag of the blanket. Mountains and valleys. Right now you are in the bottom of the valley, and your problems loom big around you. But soon you will be at the top of the mountain again. After you have lived many mountains and valleys, we will be together." Through her tears, Esperanza said, "Please get well. Please come to us." "I promise, and you promise to take care of Mama for me." Next it was Mama's turn. Esperanza could not watch. She buried her head in Hortensia's shoulder until she heard the wagon pulling away. Then she went to Mama and put her arms around her. They watched the wagon disappear down the path until it was a speck in the distance, until even the dust was gone. That's when Esperanza noticed the old trunk with the leather straps that the nuns had left. "What is in the trunk?" she asked. "Our papers to travel and clothes from the poor box of the convent." "The poor box?" People donate them, said Mama, for others who cannot afford to buy their own. Mama, at a time like this, must we worry about some poor family who needs clothes? Esperanza, said Mama, we have little money, and Hortensia, Alfonso, and Miguel are no longer our servants. We are indebted to them for our finances and our future, and that trunk of clothes for the poor, Esperanza, it is for us. Senor Rodriguez was the only person they could trust. He came after dark for secret meetings, always carrying a basket of figs for the grieving family to disguise his real reason for visiting. Esperanza fell asleep each night on a blanket on the floor, listening to the adults' hushed voices and mysterious plans, and smelling the plentiful piles of white figs that she knew would never be eaten. At the end of the week, Esperanza was sitting on the small step to Hortensia and Alfonso's cabin when Tia Louise rode up. He remained on his horse and said Alfonso to bring Mama. In a few moments, Mama walked toward them, drying her hands on her apron. She held her head high and looked beautiful, even dressed in the old clothes from the poor box. Louise, I have considered your proposal, and in the interest of the servants and Esperanza, I will marry you in due time. But you must begin replanting and rebuilding immediately, as the servants need their jobs. Esperanza was quiet and stared at the dirt, hiding the smirk on her face. Tio Luis could not contain his grin. He sat up straighter. I knew you would come to your senses, Ramona. I will announce the engagement at once. Mama nodded, almost bowing. One more thing, she said. We will need a wagon to visit Abuela. She is at the convent in La Porcima. I must see her every few weeks. I will send one over this afternoon, said Tia Louise, smiling. A new one, and those clothes, Ramona, they are not fitting for a woman of your stature, and Esperanza looks like a waif. I will send a dressmaker next week with new fabrics. In the nicest way possible, Esperanza looked up and said, Thank you, Tia Louise. I am happy that you will be taking care of us. Yes, of course, he said, not even glancing at her. Esperanza smiled at him anyway, because she knew she would never spend a night in the same house with him, and he would never be her stepfather. She almost wished she would be able to see his face when he realized that they had escaped. He wouldn't be grinning like a proud rooster then. The night before the dressmaker was scheduled to come, Mama woke Esperanza in the middle of the night, and they left with only what they could carry. Esperanza had a vial filled with clothes, a small package of tamales, and her doll from Papa. She and Mama and Hortensia were wrapped in dark shawls to blend in with the night. They could not take a chance of walking on the roads, so Miguel and Alfonso led them through the grape rows, weaving across Papa's land towards the Rodriguez ranch. There was enough moonlight so that they could see the outlines of the twisted and charred trunks, the burnt-out vines in parallel lines toward the mountains. It looked as if someone had taken a giant comb, dipped it in black paint, and gently swirled it across a huge canvas. They reached the fig orchard that separated Papa's land from Senor Rodriguez's. Alfonso, Hortensia, and Miguel walked ahead, but Esperanza held back and pulled on Mama's hand to keep her for a moment. They turned to look at what used to be El Rancho de las Rosas in the distance. Sadness and anger tangled in Esperanza's stomach as she thought of all that she was leaving, her friends and her school, her life as it once was, Abuela and Papa. She felt as though she was leaving him too. As if reading her mind, Mama said, Papa's heart will find us wherever we go. Then Mama took a determined breath and headed toward the sprawling trees. Esperanza followed but hesitated every few steps, looking back. She hated leaving, but how could she stay? With each stride, Papa's land became smaller and smaller. She hurried after Mama, knowing that she might never come back to her home again, and her heart filled with venom for Tia Louise. When she turned around one last time, she could see nothing behind her but a trail of splattered figs she had resentfully smashed beneath her feet.